Many Americans remember this photo. Major General Chris Donahue stepping onto a plane as the last U.S. service member to leave Afghanistan after 20 years of conflict. Thursday, the Biden administration released its long-awaited report reviewing the chaotic end to America's longest war. The report by the National Security Council details lessons learned and seeks to explain how certain failures came to be, saying President Biden was severely constrained by the decisions of the Trump administration. Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennen has more.
Nearly 2 years after the chaotic end to America's longest war, the White House admitted it should have started withdrawing sooner.
Clearly, we didn't get things right here with Afghanistan about how fast the Taliban were moving across the country.
But the White House took little responsibility for executing a messy and deadly exit. A 12-page summary of the government report claimed President Biden repeatedly asked military leaders if they required additional support to mitigate threats, and was told no. An August 26 suicide attack outside Kabul airport killed 13 American service members. The former head of Central Command, General Frank McKenzie, told CBS in September he advised President Biden against pulling out.
Well, I gave advice. My advice was not followed.
No mention of that is made in the report. Also absent, a July 13th internal State Department cable warning that the Taliban was making rapid territorial gains and recommending that evacuation be sped up. The White House blames the Trump administration and says its deal with the Taliban severely constrained Biden's choices.
I'm absolutely sick and tired of hearing about this.
Lance Corporal Jared Schmidt died in the Kabul airport suicide bombing. His father, Mark Schmidt, said the 12-page summary is an insult.
I don't want to sit here and listen to somebody talking about this being Trump's fault. You're the president of the United States. The buck stops with you. It's your responsibility. Stop making excuses.
And Margaret Brennen joins me now. Margaret, severely constrained. That's what the report says about the Biden administration from their predecessor. So how much of the blame for the chaotic withdrawal is the Biden administration blaming on the Trump administration?
Well, that's what's interesting here, John, is most of the conversation publicly from the Biden administration is not about the withdrawal, but rather the diplomatic negotiation and the decision to end U.S. involvement in the first place. That's the space the White House wants to engage on because they also know that it's the politically popular part of the decision. Both President Trump and President Biden campaigned, as did most candidates in that last election, on the idea of ending U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. So the basic premise laid out here is that the constraint provided to the Biden administration was the fact that Trump successfully got a deal with the Taliban to end the conflict, but pinned down a date of May, by which time the United States wasn't in a position with sufficient planning, in the view of the Biden administration, to actually execute a withdrawal, and at a time when the Taliban was at one of its strongest points since 2001 on the battlefield. And so the reality, the constraint, so to speak, was that the Taliban was starting to turn the tide and win the war at the same time the Trump administration had committed to ending U.S. involvement. So that's where they're putting the focus. But the execution of the withdrawal on the exit was on the Biden administration's watch. And so the decisions and the planning on how to execute and follow through are the part that is that are thinly detailed in these 12 pages that were publicly released. And that's the part where certainly the Republican-controlled Congress has been focused in their examination.
At various times, Biden administration officials have blamed the intelligence the president was given about how strong the Taliban was and how quickly they might take over once U.S. troops were withdrawn. Is that discussed and at all? And might it come out in the part of the briefing that Congress will get that won't be visible to the public?
Well, certainly that'll come up in future congressional questioning. But in this this 12-page report that was given to the public. There's an oblique reference to the Director of National Intelligence of Real Haynes having admitted that the timeline was not accurate. But then you also have public testimony from the president's chief military advisor, General Mark Milley, who said no one exactly nailed down the fact that the entire country's government would collapse in a matter of 11 days. So the predictions in terms of the strength of the Afghan government's ability to stand on its own feet without all the U.S. contractors, without all the U.S. infrastructure and U.S. military support, was just not accurately laid out by intelligence. There was also a lack of planning at the State Department that was laid bare. I mean, today, John, there are still tens of thousands of Afghans waiting on visas to enter this country. And some of that is because of the constraints that were in place and put in place by the Trump administration that made obtaining refugee status and obtaining visas into the United States more difficult. There are real issues of substance here that deserve a fair hearing and fair examination. But I have to say that wasn't really done in 12 pages.
Margaret Brennen breaking it down for us. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank you.